Alright, you fuckers. You thought I fucking, was gonna procrastinate? Hell nah. Time is short, motherfuckers. Alright, we're gonna fucking continue on with what we were doing. And, oh shit. We're gonna cover more of, the shit we were talking about with the China, India shit. So we already covered like the first 2 or 3 videos, so we're gonna do the next couple of videos.
China is
We
closely
have
watching the
time.
war between India and Pakistan. That's because
Yar
China
yar
is
yar.
rapidly expanding its military. Its military budget is growing every single year. It's buying lots of weapons and training millions of soldiers. And the goal is to take over the US someday. That's why the India-Pakistan war is of close interest to the CCP. This is, in fact, one of the first time Chinese equipment is being used in a war. But some people are calling China a paper tiger, and that's because of its army. Although the People's Liberation Army could probably defend the CCP in China, it's not ready for a war abroad. That's because the PLA doesn't have combat experience. Its last
would
war
imagine
was
so.
an invasion of Vietnam in 1979, which went very
1979, brother. 1970 fucking 9, brother.
poorly. In recent years, they've only fought as a part of the UN peacekeeping operations. One of these UN deployments ended in a horrible disaster, killing 2 Chinese soldiers. So, to understand why China is struggling with global power projection, it's worth looking at this incident. Now, this incident exposed the whole world to how bad the Chinese army truly is. So you know CCP bots are not going to like this video.
Oh,
and they will
100%.
probably attack it with all they've got to kill its reach.
A hun-
So
a
if you can help us fight these bots
100%.
by hitting the like and subscribe button down below,
You're not gonna
you
stop
would
me
really
though.
help us out
I'm
tremendously.
literally gonna
In
continue putting out these
2015, China
videos. I
decided
don't
to
care.
send troops to support UN operations, years after it joined the UN Truce Supervision Organization back in 1990. They sent 700 Chinese troops and commanders in total, forming the 1st Chinese UN Infantry Battalion. This battalion was sent to Juba, the capital of the newly formed Republic of South Sudan. It's the newest country in the world, only separating from Sudan back in 2011. But in 2013, just 2 years after the country's formation, South Sudan entered a civil war. President Salva Kiir accused the vice president, Riek Machar, of wanting to take over the government, which was the start of a grueling multi-sided civil war with lots of ethnic violence. Ultimately, the conflict only ended years later in 2020, causing nearly 400,000 war-related deaths, creating 1.5 million refugees, and displacing another 2 million within the country. But in August of 2015, there seemed to be hope after both sides agreed to a ceasefire agreement. It would be protected by peacekeepers from the United Nations mission to South Sudan, or UNMISS. The Chinese peacekeepers stationed at Juba were supposed to protect and provide aid to the local population in the capital, a city of more than 300,000 people at that time. The Chinese peacekeepers weren't alone though, as India, Ethiopia, and Rwanda and others also contributed a lot of troops. In total, there were 12,500 troops from 61 different countries in South Sudan, with a couple thousand stationed in the capital alone. The Chinese troops are stationed at the western side of the capital, at its perimeter. It included the UN House and 2 refugee camps called Protection of Civilians Site 1 and 3. There was also another UN perimeter to the northeast near the airport of Juba, where the other countries had their troops. This perimeter near the airport was a logistics hub, and it had a level 2 hospital with surgical tools. It was also way closer to the city center, where most of the international embassies were. But the peacekeeping operation at Juba was doomed to fail. While these UN units were in the city, the two sides of the conflict got increasingly anxious. Violating the peace treaty, soldiers on both sides began to set up bases near or inside the capital. The rebel forces alone sent 1,400 soldiers to the capital, right next to where the government forces were stationed. In total, there were 10 Sudanese military camps in or around the city. This was bound to go wrong, and on the 3rd of July, a lieutenant loyal to the vice president was killed. 4 days later, on the 7th of July, a fight broke out, killing 5 soldiers loyal to the president. And from that point, things really started to go south. The following day, Kiir and Machar wanted to put an end to the violence by meeting each other at the presidential palace. But the vice president's bodyguards and the presidential battalion got into a gunfight during the press conference. In Juba, the troops on both sides got very angry and a full-on battle started. The government forces eventually secured most of the city. The UN peacekeepers stayed on the sidelines, and for the time being, the UN bases were left unscathed. However, on the 10th of July, President Kiir ordered the assassination of Machar. Government forces rampaged through the city using tanks, artillery, fighter jets, and helicopters with no regard for the rules of war. For days, government forces were free to loot the city and commit countless war crimes, killing hundreds of civilians. Seeing all of this, the peacekeepers...
Wait, whoa. Are these like actually like Hold on.
Still refused to count his eighth. Valian got into each thing and their international embassies were.
Hold the phone,
Command
dude.
Truce Supervision Organization back in 1990. They sent 700 Chinese troops and commanders in total, forming the 1st Chinese UN Infantry Battalion. This battalion was sent to Juba, the capital of the newly formed Republic of South Sudan. It's the newest country in the world, only separating from Sudan back in 2011. But in 2013, just 2 years after the country's formation, South Sudan entered a civil war. President Salva Kiir accused the vice president, Riek Machar, of wanting to take over the government, which was the start of a grueling multi-sided civil war with lots of ethnic violence. Ultimately, the conflict only ended years later in 2020, causing nearly 400,000 war-related deaths, creating 1.5 million refugees, and displacing another 2 million within the country.
South
But
Sudan,
in August
huh?
of 2015, there seemed to be hope
Okay.
after both sides agreed to a ceasefire
Ceasefire,
agreement. It would be
okay.
protected by peacekeepers from the United Nations mission to South Sudan, or UNMISS. The Chinese peacekeepers stationed at Juba were supposed to protect and provide
Hold on,
aid
chat. Just give me a
to
second.
the
Let me just fucking throw on another shirt. I feel like I always wear this dusty ass shirt whenever I make fucking like important videos. Give me a sec. Alright. Think we're good now? Okay. Alright, chat.
local population in the capital, a city of more than 300,000 people at that time. The Chinese peacekeepers weren't alone, though, as India, Ethiopia, and Rwanda and others also contributed a lot of troops. In total, there were 12,500 troops from 61 different countries in South Sudan, with a couple thousand stationed in the capital alone. The Chinese troops were stationed at the western side of the capital, at its perimeter. It included the UN house and 2 refugee camps called Protection of Civilians Site 1 and 3. There was also another UN perimeter to the northeast near the airport of Juba, where the other countries had their troops. This perimeter near the airport was a logistics hub, and it had a level 2 hospital with surgical tools. It was also way closer to the city center, where most of the international embassies were. But the peacekeeping operation at Juba was doomed to fail. While these UN units were in the city, the two sides of the conflict got increasingly anxious. Violating the peace treaty, soldiers on both sides began to set up bases near or inside the capital. The rebel forces alone sent 1,400 soldiers to the capital, right next to where the government forces were stationed. In total, there were 10 Sudanese military camps in or around the city. This was bound to go wrong, and on the 3rd of July, a lieutenant loyal to the vice president was killed. 4 days later, on the 7th of July, a fight broke out, killing 5 soldiers loyal to the president. And from that point, things really started to go south. The following day, Kiir and Machar wanted to put an end to the violence by meeting each other at the presidential palace. But the vice president's bodyguards and the presidential battalion got into a gunfight during the press conference. In Juba, the troops on both sides got very angry and a full-on battle started. The government forces eventually secured most of the city. The UN peacekeepers stayed on the sidelines, and for the time being, the UN bases were left unscathed. However, on the 10th of July, President Kiir ordered the assassination of Machar.
I mean, like, yeah, duh. Like, what the fuck? These guys barely have any type of, like, military power. And on top of that, like, why, like, dude, what the fuck? Like, if you're a military, why would you attack that? Like, that's like suicide. That's like stepping on a landmine. Why the fuck would you attack that? Like, obviously.
Forces rampaged through the city using tanks, artillery, fighter jets, and helicopters with no regard for the rules of war. For days, government forces were free to loot the city and commit countless war crimes, killing hundreds of civilians. Seeing all of this, the peacekeepers still refused to go outside of their perimeter to try and put an end to the violence. Even worse, the protection of civilian sites themselves weren't safe. Tens of thousands of civilians fled to the UN sites in search of safety, adding to the thousands of people that were already there. But the UN camps got caught.
And you know why that is? You know why that is? Because they know that the UN sites are basically untouchable. They're like, the minute that you fucking try to touch them, you're basically signaling and saying that you want to fight the whole world. Like, that's the UN, dude. That's the United Nations, bro. Like, what the fuck? Obviously, bro.
machine guns and artillery strikes. And it wasn't like these camps had some
Obviously,
sophisticated
brother.
defenses. They had some barbed wire, metal gates, and several wooden watchtowers, and that's it. There were no things like advanced bomb shelters or reinforced concrete walls. Because the situation was so dire, Chinese troops abandoned the outer area of the perimeter and retreated to the center, leaving many civilians and humanitarian aid workers without protection. Unfortunately, on the 10th of July, a bomb hit one of the armored personnel carriers, killing
Holy
2
shit.
Chinese peacekeepers and injuring 8. There was only
Chinese
a level 1
peacekeepers.
clinic inside the perimeter without advanced medical tools, so the Chinese peacekeepers were unable to treat combat wounds effectively. They also couldn't go to the hospital at the airport because of the violence that was going on in the city. This lack of medical care was likely the reason why the second Chinese peacekeeper who lost his life in the attack didn't make it. While the peacekeeping mission was falling apart, Sudanese soldiers rampaged through the refugee camps, stealing $30 million of UN support.
Hold on, chat. I just fucking dropped some shit. Give me a second. Fuck! Fucking goddamn it! Ah. Ah! 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 God damn it. Only spilled some shit. My bad.
Supplies, including enough food to feed 200,000 people for a month. They also did horrible things to the refugees that we can't cover here on YouTube. The Chinese peacekeeping operation wasn't a complete failure, though, because they managed to shelter 9,000 civilians at the center of the camp. However, with more than 300 civilian casualties, including 20 in the refugee camp itself, and humanitarian workers being assaulted just outside the camps, many criticized China's performance. This included the American Center for Civilians in Conflict, or CIVIC. They blamed the Chinese peacekeepers for not doing their duty, claiming that a lot of the violence could have been prevented. Allegedly, the UN had ordered the peacekeepers to set up a wider perimeter and pull both sides apart, but the Chinese troops and the other peacekeepers never left their bases. Instead, they abandoned their post and only returned fire on a few occasions. Former UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon also wasn't happy with what happened, and he ordered an independent investigation. The following UN report blamed chaotic leadership for failing to protect civilians from horrible violence. It also confirmed that multiple requests were made to stand up a quick reaction force to respond, but each UN mission contingent turned down the request. Ultimately, the 1,800 UN infantry troops were underused during the battle. If we put ourselves in their shoes, it's pretty understandable that they didn't want to leave the
Is this
bases.
Sudan? No. I actually don't think this is Sudan. This is, no, I don't. They haven't mentioned Sudan at all actually in this video, so not yet. This shit is gonna be on YouTube, so I fucking all the shit that I've been covering about India has been on YouTube. So like right now we're recording.
A couple of these white armored personnel carriers and light arms. That's nothing when you're confronting armies.
This is actually I'm pretty sure. This is like, yes, South Sudan. Yeah, I actually think you're right. Yeah, I think you're actually right. This might actually be Sudan. Yeah, I'm wrong. I think I might actually be wrong. You might actually be right.
Mortars, tanks, and fighter jets.
Sorry.
Pull two sides apart
sorry.
while they're fighting each other. And
Might
UN
actually be about
peacekeepers
Sudan,
weren't
yeah.
allowed to use force either. As peacekeepers, you can only use force for self-defense.
Well, I'm so sorry, dude. I just fucking had so much shit going on right now. Fucking, I had a fucking. Sorry, dude. You know,
when
You
it's
might be
absolutely
right.
necessary in order to protect civilians. Ultimately, the situation proved too complicated for the peacekeepers to handle. Another reason for the failure was that the UN forces didn't operate under unified command.
Hey, yo! Is he grabbing his ass?
Another in order to protect civilians. Ultimately, the situation proved too complicated for the peacekeepers to handle.
What the
Another reason for the
fuck?
failure was that the UN forces didn't operate.
Oh, okay, he's grabbing the belt. Alright, alright. I was about to say, hey, yo! Is he grabbing his fucking
Under unified
cheeks?
command.
He's
There were
grabbing his
conflicting orders from
butthole?
Chinese, Ethiopian, Nepalese, and Indian troops. And the Chinese troops refused to take orders from foreign commanders because they weren't trained to do so. And this wasn't the only problem with their training. In fact, the Chinese peacekeepers didn't even understand.
See, this is what I was saying in my last video, dude. This is what I mean, dude. Like, fucking China needs to get their fucking head out of their ass, dude. Like, especially if you're gonna be doing, like, joint operations, you know, joint missions with other nations. You better fucking start training your soldiers how to take orders from somebody else that's not a part of their, you know, regime. Because what the fuck, dude? How are you going to work with other nations then, dude? Like, like, yo, are you fucking stupid? Like, yo, what the fuck?
Rules of engagement, repeatedly asking their commanders who they're allowed to shoot.
And then they're wondering why all their weapons are ass, you know, why all their shit is ass, why they never be, for the most part, winning any, like, fucking wars. Like, it's like, you know... It's like, dude, you guys can't even fucking, like, cooperate with your own allies. Like, what the fuck, dude?
Only added to the chaos and the confusion. But if the peacekeepers aren't able to do anything when it gets tough, what's even the point of having peacekeeping operations? Ultimately, their mandate was to protect civilians from violence. But with hundreds of civilian casualties at the Battle of Juba, they objectively failed. Of course, China denies all these accusations. A spokesperson for the Chinese Defense Ministry said that the Civic report was malicious speculation. He claimed that Chinese peacekeeping officers and soldiers remained at their posts, quickly organizing reinforcements and continuing to implement the mandate of UN MISS while rescuing wounded soldiers. Of course, the independent UN investigation put a hole in this argument. But still, China argues that it was never their duty to protect people outside of the perimeter, and that the order to pull both sides apart was unrealistic. There were no major ramifications after the battle ended, although China did ask the South Sudanese government to punish those responsible for the killing of 2 Chinese peacekeepers. Meanwhile, the Chinese peacekeeping operations in Juba only continued. The troops had to be replaced, though, in part because they were too traumatized to do any peacekeeping. During their patrols, they refused to exit their armored vehicles and only dared to peek through the windows. But ever since, China has sent a new battalion every year, and in December of 2024, the 11th Peacekeeping Battalion was welcomed in Juba. According to the UN, these new Chinese peacekeepers are combat ready. They've probably learned from some of their past mistakes because Xi Jinping ordered a major restructuring of the Chinese military in 2017, 1 year after the Juba disaster. All in all, the mission wasn't a complete failure for China because it allowed them to learn and improve. That's also why China continued to join new UN peacekeeping missions, even after the disaster at Juba. Since 2015, China has sent more than 50,000 soldiers abroad on 24 different UN peacekeeping missions, becoming the 9th biggest contributor of blue helmets. In total, 16 Chinese peacekeepers have lost their lives during these missions, making the ultimate sacrifice in service of others. China is also prepared to give a lot of money, becoming the 2nd biggest funder of UN peacekeeping, only behind the US. This is all very helpful, because it helps to maintain stability in the most vulnerable countries around the world. But as people are pointing out, it also serves China's own goals of getting influence abroad. South Sudan is actually a big example of this. The country has a ton of oil, with almost 4 billion barrels in proven reserves. The Dar Petroleum Operating Company in Sudan currently produces 90,000 barrels of oil per day, and China owns a 41% stake in this company, in order to secure oil supplies for the Chinese market. In part, China's peacekeepers were sent to South Sudan to protect these oil interests. There's also 3 trillion cubic feet of untapped natural gas in Sudan and South Sudan combined. Other natural resources include iron ore, copper, gold, and rare earth metals. Because the country is still underdeveloped, there are a ton of opportunities in infrastructure. China recently finished a new infrastructure project in South Sudan, called the Clement Mboro Bridge. But it's also trying to get influence in the country with more shady deals. China is one of the biggest supplier of arms to both sides of the South Sudan conflict. So no matter which side wins, they're dependent on China. Still, it's very ironic to be selling arms and peacekeeping at the same time. It just shows what China's own ambitions are in South Sudan, namely getting influence and getting combat experience.
Exactly what I've been saying, dude. You know, Just getting their fucking grubby little fingers fucking involved in everything, man. Instead of focusing on their backyard, man. And they're fucking confused why their shit is like not working, man.
And the UN kind of takes this as a given that countries always act out of self-interest. After all, China's contributions are still net positive for the organization. However, going back to China's fundamental problem with combat experience, UN peacekeeping might not be the solution. The Chinese peacekeepers can learn a lot about how to operate military bases and how to deal with threats. But UN peacekeeping operations are always very limited. You see, Juba wasn't the first place where UN peacekeeping operations have failed. It has happened multiple times that UN peacekeepers got caught in the crossfire and failed to protect the local civilians. One of the worst failures in UN peacekeeping history happened during the Bosnian War, with the Srebrenica massacre in 1995. It was the worst genocide in Europe after World War II, with over 8,000 Bosniaks killed by Bosnian Serbs. Worst of all, these civilians thought they were protected by UN battalions from the Netherlands. But the so-called Dutch Bat only had 370 peacekeepers, and they were only lightly armed. They were no match for the Bosnian Serb army, and when the Serbs wanted to massacre the local population, Dutch Bat couldn't do anything. But an even worse failure happened in Rwanda a year earlier, during the 1994 Rwandan massacre. 800,000 people were killed in the span of 100 days, and the UN peacekeepers in Rwanda failed to intervene. There were less than 3,000 peacekeepers in the whole country, and they were severely under-equipped. Now, the UN is constantly trying to improve its missions, but the fundamental problem remains. That's because the UN has all kinds of rules about peaceful conflict resolution. So, there are very strict rules of engagement for the peacekeepers, and they don't have a lot of lethal weapons at their disposal.
Peacekeepers.
This all sounds great in theory, but it means that many missions are doomed to fail. In the end, UN missions don't have the lethal force that's necessary in combat, and they often lack advanced equipment like tanks, fighter jets, and artillery. This is also tied to budget constraints and a reluctance by countries to put their own military equipment on the line. If this isn't fixed, there might be a Juba 2.0, where the peacekeepers are paralyzed and unable to join the fight. With that in mind, China might need to look for a new strategy to get combat experience. One of the options is to bypass the UN altogether and to help countries directly with peacekeeping and counterterrorism operations. This has a number of advantages, especially if you're trying to train your own troops without many complicated rules. But the downside is that this makes other countries suspicious. The US has a reputation for intervening in foreign wars, but it doesn't want China to do the same. Also, the host countries might have their reservations about inviting Chinese troops over to join their conflict. Understandably, they'd rather have UN blue helmets, and inviting American or European peacekeepers also has its benefits. But China desperately wants the People's Liberation Army to set up bases around the world. And Djibouti is the first country where China has been successful.
Djibouti.
In 2017, China opened its first foreign military base in Djibouti, operated by the Chinese Navy. Allegedly, it's for anti-piracy, evacuation operations, peacekeeping, and counterterrorism. But it's also used for global power projection, because Djibouti is strategically located near the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, one of the most important waterways for international trade. The location is pretty awkward though, because a few miles from there, the Americans also have a base, called Camp Lemonnier. Understandably so, Washington didn't appreciate it when Djibouti invited the Chinese over in 2017. And ever since, both the US and China have been constantly spying on each other's bases. China also uses the base to monitor what the US is doing in the Red Sea with the Houthis to try and study American military strategies.
Yes, according to Hamas Piker, it's the straw hats, you know, because according to him, these are the fucking, these motherfuckers are fucking Luffy.
China desperately trying to expand its global military presence. There could be many more of these situations in the future. Another way for China to get combat experience, or a substitute for it, is doing large-scale training exercises. In 2009, the PLA launched its first ever massive military drill involving 50,000 troops to stress test its infrastructure and logistics. They also train regularly with Russia and Central Asian countries under the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. Russia obviously has more combat experience than China, carrying the
Obviously,
Soviet legacy.
dude.
Since 1991, they've also fought in Chechnya,
Dude.
Georgia, Syria,
I'm literally against communism, even I can fucking tell you as much, dude.
and obviously in Ukraine since 2014. On top of that, Russia has a lot of mercenaries fighting in African countries like Mali and the Central African Republic. So the PLA has a lot to learn from their Russian counterpart. In 2018, when Russia held its largest war game since the Cold War in Siberia, China was also invited. The PLA sent 3,500 troops, with tanks and aircraft. It was a success, because China later joined new Russian military exercises in 2019 and 2021. Since 2019, China has also been holding annual naval exercises with Russia and Iran, to simulate naval battles and to stress test their systems. But obviously, the most infamous Chinese military exercises revolve around Taiwan. They have picked up in recent years, with China simulating naval blockades, airstrikes, and sea assaults. Obviously, the goal is to refine Chinese military capabilities to eventually take over the island. However, it's not clear whether the PLA will get there with their military exercises alone. Because as China's first combat disaster in South Sudan showed, the PLA isn't yet ready to deal with the unpredictable and chaotic realities of war. If this happens during a relatively small operation in South Sudan, it doesn't seem like that big of a deal. But if China makes the same mistakes in an actual war scenario, the consequences are unimaginable. Thanks for watching. YouTube just dropped a
Oh man, guys. Hold on, I was just fucking uploading some shit really quick. Yeah, that. Oh man, we still got a lot to cover though, so don't worry.
Well, the conflict between India and Pakistan is rapidly escalating, with the Pakistani military saying that it's launched retaliatory strikes against India.
Now, days earlier, India carried out airstrikes in Pakistan in retaliation for last month's attack on 26 tourists in Indian-controlled Kashmir.
The Indian Armed Forces say that they've launched Operation Sindoor.
India targets Pakistan's air defenses.
Hold on, what was that called? Operation Sindoor? Hold on, chat. Let me just give me 1 second. That actually sounds pretty badass.
Operation Sindoor.
India targets Pakistan's air defenses.
The conflict tonight at the worst level in the past 3 decades. And fears now it's on the brink of all-out war.
All-out war.
India-Pakistan war was the first time the world got to see how good the Chinese weapons are. And as you can imagine, much like Chinese products, Chinese weapons did not live up to the hype.
Yeah, them fucking goddamn temu ass weapons, yo. You got them shit off fucking Temu.
As you can see from your screen, India was able to recover multiple Chinese missiles almost intact. Now Western...
Yeah, of fucking course, dude, because them shits didn't even fucking work, bro. They probably forgot to plug in the fucking USB-C cord or some shit. They probably forgot to charge them bitches.
Countries are extremely keen to see what's exactly in them and how they stack up against the NATO counterparts. It doesn't just stop there. India was also able to disable and in some instances destroy Chinese air defenses inside Pakistan. That's also something Western militaries will be keen to learn more about. So today I have none other than former Navy SEAL Chuck Farr break down exactly how Chinese weapons stack up against NATO weapons. Let's get into it. Now, as always, before starting, if you guys are enjoying the video, be sure to hit the like and subscribe down below. It helps us out tremendously and makes it possible for us to bring you these videos every single day. Let's begin.
The 2025 India-Pakistan conflict.
China versus NATO. That's what I mean, dude. Like, these fuckers literally think that they can take the whole world, bro. Like, that shit is crazy, bro. Like, stop it, dude. Just fucking stop.
Centered on the disputed Kashmir region. It escalated rapidly after India launched Operation Sindoor on May the 7th, targeting alleged militant infrastructure in Pakistani-administered Kashmir and Punjab. The operation, executed primarily by French-made Rafale jets armed with Scalp cruise missiles and AA-SM Hammer glide bombs, triggered a fierce Pakistani response. Over the following days, multiple air skirmishes unfolded, with Pakistan's Chinese-made J-10C Vigorous Dragons and JF-17 Block 3 Thunder strike fighters, armed with PL-15 beyond visual range missiles and Chinese HQ-9 air defense systems, also facing off against India's Rafale, Su-30, and MiG-29. The most significant air engagement occurred on 6 May to 7 May, described by a Pakistani source as the largest and longest dogfight in recent aviation history.
Wait, whoa, hold on, dude.
Largest and longest dog.
India, Pakistan, 125 jet clash in one of the largest dogfights in recent history. India versus Pakistan. I don't know, dude. Unless India shows some fucking proof for that shit, I'm not believing that shit, dude. What the fuck does Pakistan have to even fight against, dude? Like, in my personal opinion, you know, like, these fuckers haven't even shown a lick of evidence. So it's like, I don't know, man, you know?
Fight in recent aviation.
125 jets. Like, that's a lot, dude. Like, you expect me to believe Pakistan has fucking enough jets to even fight, dude? You know? It's like,
The fight involved approximately 125.
Then again, that's like assuming that China isn't involved. If China is involved, then yeah, I could believe that.
Craft in an hour-long engagement at ranges exceeding 160 kilometers. Pakistan claimed a victory, asserting that its J-10 fighters, armed with Chinese PL-15 missiles, downed 5 Indian jets, 3 French-made Rafales, 1 Russian Su-30, and a Russian MiG-29, as well as an Israeli-made Heron drone. U.S. officials could confirm at least 2 Indian losses, including a Rafale, while India media reported 3 crash sites in Indian-controlled Kashmir.
Wait,
India
whoa. Hold on.
Losses, including a Rafale, while India media reported 3 crash sites in Indian-controlled Kashmir. India has not officially confirmed these losses, though the Indian Air Force stated losses are a part of combat.
Yeah.
Pakistan
So there are some
no
losses.
aircraft losses.
Okay, so basically India did confirm some losses. All right. So shit is actually fucking happening. All right.
Its claims remain unverified. A second notable skirmish on 9 May saw Pakistan's Chinese-made JF-17 Block 3s equipped with CM-401 hypersonic strike missiles attack Indian logistical depots near Pathknot and Gurdishpur, bypassing Indian radar defenses. India's Russian-made S-400 air defense complexes intercepted Pakistani drone and missile strikes on Amistar and other cities, marking its first combat use by India. India retaliated with precision strikes on Pakistani air bases, including the base at Sorguda, damaging runways and Pakistani infrastructure. Let's get a look at the performance of Chinese weapons in this fight. Chinese-built J-10C Vigorous Dragon strike fighters and JF-17 Block 3 Thunder jets that emerged as Pakistan's air superiority workhorses. First, the Chinese-built J-10 and JF-17 Block 3 are both classified as 4.5.
Why is it fucking green?
4th generation.
What the fuck? Dude, that shit literally looks like I fucking created that shit in like a fucking custom lobby type shit. Why is it like fucking like neon, almost basically essentially like neon green, dude? Like what the fuck, dude?
Plus fighter jet, based on their advanced avionics, radar systems, and weapon capabilities. The J-10C Vigorous Dragon is a multi-role combat aircraft developed by the Chengdu Aircraft Corporation. Its advanced active electronically scanned array radar, stealth features like reduced radar cross-section, use of composite materials, and the ability to carry China's long-range PL-15 air-to-air missiles make it an advanced threat. Its digital fly-by-wire system and WS-10B engine further enhance its agility and performance, positioning it as comparable to upgraded Western fighters like the F-16 Block 7.
Western fighters, North.
Block
Comparing it to us.
Thunder was a joint development between Pakistani Aerial Complex and the CAC, Chinese Aircraft Corporation. The JF-17...
Why the fuck would you align with fucking China? Like, I just don't get it. Why are you taking equipment from them? Their shit is ass! Actual dog shit! Like, it's fucking trash! What the fuck?
Block 3 is a lightweight multi-role fighter. It's also classified as 4th plus generation, featuring a KLJ-7A ESA radar, advanced electronic warfare systems, a helmet-mounted display, and compatibility.
It's like, and you guys are wondering why you can't compete, dude. It's like, because you guys are taking shit from China, dude. China is ass, dude. They're ass. Like, I'm sorry, dude. They're fucking terrible.
With modern missiles like China's deadly.
Fuck!
The Thunder's design emphasizes affordability and versatility, with improvements over earlier blocks in maneuverability and, importantly, combat range. Both aircraft incorporate technologies that bridge the gap between 4th and 5th generation fighters, like the F-16, MiG-29, and real 5th generation.
Oh, let's just look this up, dude. Let's look this up, dude. Matter of fact, let's look this up. Who? I'm sorry, I'm pretty drunk right now. Who has the best fighter planes in the world 2025? In 2020, let me fucking move this just so you guys can see this shit, dude. In 2025, the United States is widely considered to have the best fighter pilots in the world, with the F-22 Raptor and the F-35 Lightning II being top examples. Russia and China are also developing advanced fighters, but the U.S. remains at the forefront. Why the fuck would you fucking... It's like, dude, oh, man, bro. Oh, my God. Oh my God!
Damn, son, where'd you
find stealth fighters like the F-35 and maybe even China's J-20. Chinese 4+ generation fighters have advanced sensors and networked warfare capabilities, but they lack the stealth characteristics of NATO's 5th generation jets. The J-10C, equipped with active electronically scanned array radars and PL-15 missiles, proved highly effective in beyond visual range engagement. Its combat debut against India marked the first confirmed kill by a Chinese-made J-10 family aircraft, downing at least one French-made Rafale, a significant propaganda win for China. The JF-17 Block 3, the Thunder, with approximately 24 units of service, showcased its versatility by delivering CM-401 hypersonic strike missiles, a first in South Asian warfare. These Pakistani aircraft outperformed India's Rafales in beyond visual range scenarios, partly due to superior missile range and networked operations with airborne early warning platforms. However, many analysts think the principal edge was tactical rather than technological. The J-10C and the JF-17 are not China's top-tier fighters and lag behind the J-20 in stealth jet compatibility. Their successes were owed much to Pakistan's tactical execution and India's operational missteps, such as overcommitting fighters into Pakistan's SAM zones or failing to counter network PL-15 missile salvos. So how did China's latest missiles actually fare in combat? The PL-15 is China's long-range beyond visual range missile with an estimated combat radius of 200+ kilometers. This was the star of Pakistan's air-to-air arsenal. Fired from J-10C or JF-17 platforms, it reportedly outperformed India's European Meteor and India's indigenously made Astra air-to-air missile. The PL-15's hybrid guidance system combines inertial navigation, mid-course data link updates from airborne early warning platforms, and a radar seeker for terminal homing, allowed precise strike without continuous illumination by the launching aircraft. Wreckage of a Chinese PL-15E, the export variant of this missile, was recovered delivered in Punjab and revealed its advanced design, sparking intelligence interest in India and Western capitals. Pakistan delivered China's CM-401 hypersonic missile air-launched by JF-17s. They demonstrated China's leap into long-range precision strike technology. This missile's ability to bypass Indian radar corridors and strike logistical targets underscored Pakistan's emerging anti-access aerial denial capability. However, the PL-15's success was not universal. Some missiles missed targets due to long-range shots with limited guidance support, and a tactic that was necessitated by both sides' reluctance to cross
Of course it
hostile
did.
frontiers. Pakistan's HQ-9P long-range surface-to-air missile system with a 260-kilometer range formed the backbone of its air defense network, integrated with Chinese LY-80 medium-range SAMs and Chinese-made ZDK-03 airborne early warning aircraft. It provided layered coverage over key cities and military installations. The HQ-9 missile reportedly intercepted some Indian munitions, but its performance overall was mixed. Faring better was Pakistan's Swedish-made Saab 2000
They're
Aerie
Swedish
advanced
made. They
early
had to get the
warning and
Swedes
command
involved.
platforms. These aircraft, equipped with Aerie radars, were capable of detecting targets at 450 kilometers and played a pivotal role. These systems coordinated J-10C and JF-17 strikes, providing mid-course guidance for Pakistan's PL-15 missiles and enabled silent engagements where Pakistani fighters operated with their radars turned off, enhancing survivability. The Chinese ZDK-03 advanced early warning aircraft complemented the Aerie, although their performance fell short of ideal. Technical issues have always plagued Pakistan's Chinese-made advanced early.
Technical issues? Oh yeah? Oh yeah? Those are the only issues? Fucking plague. Okay, dude.
Warning aircraft. From the outset, there were compatibility problems between the Chinese-made systems and Pakistan's American and Western air defense infrastructure. The shortcomings of the ZDK-03 showed India's European missiles were able to penetrate Pakistani defenses, striking targets in Punjab and Kashmir, exploited the vulnerabilities in Chinese radar and targeting suites. Pakistan's claims of downing 5 Indian aircraft, 3 Rafales, 1 Su-30, 1 MiG-29, and an Israeli-made Heron drone are partially corroborated by U.S. and Indian sources, which confirm at least 2 or 3 losses, including a Rafale and a Mirage 2000. Visual wreckage of Rafale aircraft in Indian-controlled Kashmir and audio recordings released by Pakistan lend credibility to these claims, though independent verification is lacking. India's strikes, however, were not without success. Operation Sindoor damaged Pakistani airfields, including at Sargodha, and killed an estimated 35 to 40 Pakistani personnel. India's Russian-made S-400 air defense systems neutralized Pakistani drone and missile strikes, but was not a standout. Apparently, the S-400 was unable to distinguish friend from foe during the massive dogfights.
Of course
on
it
6
wasn't
to
able
7
to.
May. These air battles highlighted
Of course it
Pakistan's
wasn't able to,
tactical
dude.
advantage in beyond visual range combat, driven by Chinese
Why would
systems
it be able
integration
to?
with advanced early warning and ground radar.
You know?
India's losses exposed vulnerabilities
As soon as I fucking left,
in
my
the
camera just
Rafale's
fucking
lack
crashed
of radar
out.
stealth and India's Su-30's low readiness rate, which was only
Sorry, I went to go tinkle really quick.
60% in 2023. Rules of engagement may also have constrained Indian pilots, preventing preemptive strikes and amplifying Pakistani weapons' apparent effectiveness. So, how would Chinese weapons stack up against NATO opponents? Well, China's J-10C and Pakistan's JF-17 Block 3 are comparable to NATO's Eurofighter Typhoon and the F-16 Block 70-72 in avionics and radar, but the lack of stealth and sensor fusion of 5th-generation jets like the F-35 mean these aircraft are on the second shelf. China's PL-15 missile rivals NATO's AIM-120D AMRAAM and Meteor in range and guidance, with a 200-plus kilometer range, matching or exceeding the Meteor's 200 kilometers. But NATO's missiles benefit from more mature data link integration and countermeasures resistance, honed through decades of deployments and exercises. China's CM-401 hypersonic missile has no direct NATO equivalent, though the U.S. is developing hypersonic air-launched systems like the AGM-183, air-launched rapid response weapon. China's HQ-9P surface-to-air missile system is roughly analogous to Russia's S-300 or early Gen
So
1
basically, in layman's
Patriot
terms, it's like a
barracks, but
shittier
lags
version.
way behind the Patriot
Yeah.
3.
Lags way
in
behind.
intercepting
Notice how he says that
advanced
shit,
threats.
dude, because it's a fucking temu weapon, dude. That's fucking why, dude. Just call it how it is, dude. You don't gotta be nice, dude. You're not fooling anybody here, dude. It's a fucking goddamn fucking temu weapon, bro. I could probably make that shit in my house right now if I really wanted to.
Like hypersonic munitions. Pakistan's Chinese-made ZDK-03 advanced early warning systems had been a disappointment and were scheduled for retirement, but served during
Scheduled
these
for
air
retirement.
engagements,
You hear
with the
these
slack
fuckers?
taken up by Saab Airy AEW
Oh my God.
platforms. China's aerial early warning platforms are inferior to NATO's E3 Sentry.
Yeah, inferior
or
is an
E7
understatement,
Edge,
brother.
which boast longer
An
endurance,
understatement.
multi-domain integration, and resilience against electronic warfare. China versus NATO. What would a hypothetical matchup look like? If Chinese equipped
They would get
forces
fucked.
faced
That's
NATO,
what it would
the
look like.
outcome
What the
would
fuck
likely
do you
favor
mean?
the West, despite
Exactly.
China's
Like, what the
demonstrated
fuck do you
prowess.
mean?
Underpinning any
Because that's all
air
that China is good for, dude. It's just demonstrating shit. But they're not good at actually fighting shit. They're never good at actually fighting shit. All they're good for is just... this is like a chihuahua, dude. It's like all bike. It's all bark, no fucking bite, dude. Why do you think they don't have the balls to invade us, dude? Because they can't. Because they're all fucking bark and no bite.
battle would be China's KJ-2000 airborne early warning and control aircraft, which is based on the venerable Ilyushin IL-76. Equipped with a fixed radar housing 3 ESA radars for 360-degree coverage with a detection range of about 470 kilometers, it supports command and control for air operations.
Of course.
But this platform has shortfalls versus U.S. AEW systems like the EC Sentry and the E7 Wedgetail. The IL-76 is less modern, lower endurance and efficiency compared to the E7 Boeing 737-based platform. China's radars, while advanced, their data processing lags behind the E3's upgraded systems or the E7's multi-role electronically scanned array in both targeting discrimination and tracking capacity. Quantity is also a factor. Only 4 or 5 Chinese KJ-2000 are
Only
operational,
4 or
limited
5.
coverage compared to the larger U.S. AEW fleet. 4
course,
Chinese
dude.
platforms are
These guys are
judged
like literally trying
insufficient
so hard to
support
compete with us,
large-scale
bro. It's like,
local
dude,
engagement
stop,
air
dude.
battles and would be
Like,
woefully
just stop.
short of
Stop
supporting
trying to compete
any
with us and just
lengthy
try to
air
better your own
campaign.
country,
The
man.
KJ-2000
Literally that simple.
communication
If you
systems
just
are
better your own
also
country and
less
focus on your own
resilient,
civilians, you'll be good, bro.
sophisticated US electronic countermeasures, like those aboard EA-6G Growlers, which can disrupt its detection and data link. There is also the combat-proven superiority of Western aircraft. NATO's F-35s with stealth and
Of
sensor
course.
fusion would neutralize the J-10s and JF-17's advantages
Like, what
in
the
beyond
fuck?
visual
What kind of
range
question
combat.
even is
And
that, dude?
China's supposed fifth-generation fighters remained wholly untested in an actual combat engagement. The
Untested
F-35's
is fucking
radar
crazy,
and
dude. Like,
electro-optical target
untested,
systems
yo?
outmatched Chinese equivalent,
Unfucking
enabling
tested?
first-rate,
Okay, George.
first-shot kill. NATO's AIM-120D and Meteor missiles paired with Link 16 data links would counter China's PL-15 salvos through superior situational awareness and countermeasures. NATO's advanced
yeah, I
early
fucking
warning
bet, dude. I
platforms,
fucking
particularly
bet.
the E7, provide unparalleled battle space management, detecting threats at 550 plus kilometers and
Damn.
coordinating multi-domain operations. Chinese weapons and aircraft, though effective against India, would struggle against NATO's electronic warfare capabilities, especially
fucking
the
bet.
EA-18 Growlers jamming. NATO's ground-based radar, like the AN/TPY-2 and Aegis systems, offer unmatched tracking and intercept capabilities, rendering China's HQ-9P surface-to-air missiles less effective against stealthy or hypersonic threats. Pakistan's
Rather than
reliance
less
on
effective.
Chinese
That
systems,
shit is
while a leap
hilarious to me,
forward,
dude.
lack the doctrinal maturity of joint operation and the experience of NATO forces. The U.S. and allies regularly conduct large-scale exercises like Red Flag that redefine tactics against near-peer threats. Pakistan's success in Kashmir relied on localized SAM dominance and surprise, tactics that would be less viable against NATO's global reach and overwhelming air superiority. The takeaway? Kashmir was a wake-up call, but NATO retains the edge. These air battles have elevated Chinese reputation as a military exporter, with the J-10 PL-15 and the CM-401 hypersonic missile proving their mettle against India's Western and Russian systems. But Pakistan's tactical successes underscore the potency of Chinese technology when paired with effective advanced early warning and innovative tactics. But is that enough? Against the
No, it
Western
is not.
opponent, qualitative and
No,
quantitative
it is not.
advantages of
No.
F-35s, advanced AEW platforms, and robust air defense radars. would
Oh,
likely
it's
overwhelm Chinese
robust.
forces. The conflict serves as a warning to the West. Chinese weapons are closing the gap, but NATO's technological and operational superiority remains decisive for now.
YouTube just dropped a mind-boggling announcement. It is paying creators $64 million per day.
Alright, now we're gonna get on to the next video. I don't waste any time on that shit. Alright, let's get right into it. Whoops.
The Wall Street Journal is reporting that China has stopped publishing hundreds of statistics, making it harder to know what's actually going on with the economy there.
I know that China is doing very poorly right now. I just saw some reports coming out, and I don't want that to happen to China. I like the president.
Financial problems
China.
happening in China right now. The promise of China's market has faded as its once booming economy hits trouble.
Things have not gotten better in China at all, even with a temporary trade deal. In fact, Chinese citizens are realizing that the CCP is telling them one thing while doing something entirely different. In fact, we now have another Chinese professor openly publishing a letter criticizing Xi Jinping and his economy. She said, and I quote, "The problem lies in the economy and the root is in politics." She took direct aim at the GDP figures CCP published for 2024. Now, last time a prominent economist went on CCP state media and called out CCP for lying about the GDP, he was never seen again. So we can only imagine what will happen to this professor, because according to reports, it seems CCP has gotten to her already. But first, here's more details about the last economist who called out the CCP.
Get to his comments in a bit, but this is a prominent economist. He is chief economist of SDIC Securities, a state-owned company. He has advised top officials and regulators before. He said that consumption growth is stronger in provinces with older population and it's weaker in provinces with younger population. And he said this is a bit counterintuitive. It might be a bit hard to accept, but he says this can be summarized into three phrases. Older people are full of vibrancy, younger people are lifeless, and middle-aged people have nothing to live for. So it's very sobering comments there that we rarely hear in the public discourse in China, because this is an environment where we know analysts have been censoring themselves, perhaps avoiding using words like deflation, because officials have been calling for a more positive narrative around the economy. And he goes on to justify his thesis. He said that older people are spending because they're getting regular pension, but younger people, their expectations on income is diminishing, so they're holding that back. And he also said that the job market is worse than what the official data says. He estimates that there are about 47 million migrant laborers who have left the cities, gone back to their home provinces because they can't get jobs in the cities, and they have basically disappeared from the data because the data only captures unemployment in urban areas. So when they left the urban areas, they're no longer in the data. He also said that...
Wait, what? So they no longer. Oh, I mean, yeah, I mean, technically that kind of would be true because, like, why would you count as that data if you're not even in that, like type of area, you know?
GDP is overcounted by 3 percentage points a year in the past 3 years. Cumulatively, he said it's overcounted by 10 percentage points over the past 3 years. This is based on his analysis comparing growth data versus investment, consumption, and labor force data.
This warning
Labor
went
force
viral
data.
on Chinese social media, and the reason behind it is simple. Someone finally had the balls to say something that everyone
Somebody
knew
finally
was
had the
truth. As if
fucking
this wasn't
balls!
This warning was coming from someone who previously worked for the CCP.
The CCP.
And that's exactly why the government was
Uh-huh.
freaking. The Chinese censors started working
Ah.
overtime, and China started deleting this warning from their social media before it could snowball into something big. Now, this warning was roughly a few months ago, back in December, and it seems more and more people are speaking out about this again. Now, I'm sure CCP bots are going to be working overtime to downvote any videos that talk about this, so if you guys can please hit the like and subscribe button down below, it really does help us out tremendously. First, let's start with who this guy was, and then we'll get into the recent warnings from Chinese university professors. This economist was Gao Shanwan, a chief economist at SDIC Securities and someone who previously advised countries' regulators and top officials. One of the most shocking part of the speech was most definitely him calling out that China's official GDP numbers are not accurate. According to
Yeah, fucking course they're not fucking accurate, dude. We're talking about a country that would fucking starve their own citizens. What the fuck makes you think that they're honorable enough to tell the truth? Like what?
Gao,
What?
China's GDP probably averaged around 2% in the last 2-3 years, even though the official number is close to 5%. And this last sentence he said is the most damning, and I'm quoting, "But we know, and I think, the official number will always be around 5%. He said this in early December, and guess what? At the end of the year, the official Chinese GDP was 5.2% GDP growth. And the same thing in Q1 of 2025. The Chinese GDP expectation was 5.1%, and actual GDP growth came in above expectation at 5.4%. Even though none of the other data actually support this 5.4% figure. This is just a CCP habit.
So they're
People
lying?
are finally speaking up. And the public is going along with this. They're admiring how brave it is to call something like this out in a public state media setting. Here's public's reaction.
And write some comments on social media. So what are people saying?
Yeah, I mean, as you can imagine, it's really gaining a lot of traction on social media. Yesterday, I was just reading through the comments. Many people just commenting about, well, he is a brave man to say those words, and it's not so much his speech that is important, not the content of it, but rather the fact that his comments were broadcast, they appear to be tolerated, and that is worth praising. Others are saying, I hope the people...
And this is what I be saying, dude. This is the problem with having like a fucking communistic fucking government, dude, like the CCP. Is that people get so tired of being censored and, being told what they can and cannot say and all this bullshit. This is what I mean, dude. At the end of the day, you could talk shit about America. You could say blah, 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 blah. But at the end of the day, dude, we're the most free country in the world, dude. This is the only country where you could fucking come here and, come here legally at least. Come here legally and fucking, be a citizen, pay taxes and all this shit, and talk shit about your government. Talk shit about the government. This is the only place in the world where you can be like a citizen, be like an American, and talk shit about the government and complain about it, and nothing's gonna happen to you. Literally. This is the only place in the world where that's gonna happen, because there's freedom of fucking speech, dude.
Speak the truth will stand out, that policymakers will actually confront the issues head on, and still others are saying that, well, we need to pay the old people more, raise pensions, and some others are saying it might be a little bit one-sided. They're saying it's not so much the elderly spending the pension, but these pensions could be spent by the family members to pay for young kids' tuition and food, so it's not necessarily the elderly people who are spending a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, but other people could be spending the money on their behalf.
Well, clearly CCP could not afford this, so by the very next day, all the posts relating to the speech were deleted, and Gao
Of course they
was
fucking
publicly
were.
banished. His WeChat account was shut down, likely in retaliation for his frank comments about the CCP economy. Unfortunately,
Fucking
though,
course
it
it was.
seems that the Chinese economy has continued to struggle, and Xi Jinping has just doubled down on his censorship. Just this month, China stopped publishing multiple economic data, so foreign companies
course
and
it
foreign
did.
countries could not exactly
fuck?
tell how the Chinese economy was doing during this trade war. Well, guess what? We have another shocking open letter that was published by a female Peking University professor opposing Xi Jinping and calling China's current system an inescapable predicament and a hopeless system. So let's get
It
into
literally
the
is a hopeless
system.
system,
Now, guys,
dude.
this
Communism
is
is
a long
literally
one. It is an
hopeless,
open
dude.
letter by
Like,
a
you're not gonna
professor
win anything,
nonetheless,
dude.
But I'm gonna read the whole thing so you guys get all the facts. I must say, people in China truly long for change. Yesterday, Zhang Yingji.
That's what I mean, dude. This is why I say the CCP and not the Chinese people, dude. Because Chinese people hate fucking the CCP as much as we do, bro. Like, dude, these people want change. They want democracy. You know, they want fucking reform as much as we do. They want change, bro. Like, the CCP is ass. It's
Associate
trash.
professor in the marketing department and Guangzhou School of Management, Peking University, published an article in the US-based Chinese language media outlet Yibao, criticizing Xi Jinping era and publicly calling for
Like, dude, I don't even fucking live in China. Then I can tell you that the CCP sucks ass. What the fuck?
political reform. She even quoted Mao Zedong, an American historian and strategist, who served as the principal China policy and planning advisor to the former U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. The CCP has consistently attacked you as a major traitor. Below is the full English translation of the article, Inescapable Dilemma in Redeemable System. After studying and working in the US for 10 years, I returned to the familiar Beijing. 12 years ago, after graduating from Tsinghua University, I embarked on a journey to pursue PhD in the US. Now, I've been teaching at neighboring Peking University for over 4 years. More than a decade has passed in the blink of an eye. And for more than a decade,
Damn.
it has all been the new era
A
of
decade is
Communist Party
crazy.
under Xi's rule. My deepest feeling summed up is nothing more than 8 words: inescapable dilemma and redeemable system. Thus, I take up my pen to organize the heartfelt truths and scholarly
Inescapable
reflections
dilemma,
accumulated
irredeemable
over these
system.
years
Yeah.
into an article
Gotta
to
get the
share
CCP
with
the
everyone.
fuck out of there.
China's National Bureau of
Too much
Statistics
power in one
announced
man,
that
dude.
China's GDP growth for 2024
Even
was
the best,
5%.
even the best
Seeing
of them
this
can
figure,
corrupt
many
them.
people laughed. At the macro level, the economic indicators released by the authorities are definitely meant to be protected. Now, pause right there. The reason C quoted the protected word is because CCP is now just not releasing these indicators. Anyways, let's continue. I wonder how much pressure Director Kang Yi of the Statistics Bureau was under at the time. But the key issue lies in whether the structure of economic development behind it is healthy and the micro level reactions of the people after seeing this figure. These are the real problems. At the micro and meso levels, various industries show a trend of widespread decline and dimming confidence, whether it's ordinary people or market entities. They are deeply worried about the future prospects. Businesses cannot survive. Money deposited in rural banks cannot be withdrawn.
Oh, I
and
would
people
imagine
are
so.
fleeing abroad in droves. Among my colleagues, quite a few have obtained permanent residency or green cards overseas. Many
Well,
work in
I
China
would
while their
imagine
children
so.
and assets are abroad. Many of the CCP officials' kids are overseas, here in the United States or in Europe. So it's laughable when Xi Jinping gets on the state TV and tells the youth of China to sacrifice their future for the country
Yeah, this
and
guy,
do
this
something
fucking
that is
clown.
needed by the nation. It's truly
This
just
guy can't
ironic.
even keep his own
Anyways, let's
fucking
continue with the letter.
you know, his own
For
youth
example,
generation
a
believing in
retired
him. Like, you
university
hear this
leader
guy?
who's a professor at our institute spends most of the year abroad with their children, occasionally returning to vent to us. As for the dean, not to mention, they seize every opportunity to go abroad. Growing up in China, studying and working abroad, and returning to China for family reasons, of course, I hope my country can prosper. However, as the years go by, what I have seen in the recent years is not getting better, but worse. There's an American scholar named Mao Zedong, whose most famous saying is to separate the CCP authorities from the Chinese people, which makes a lot of sense. The CCP authorities are at best painting grand visions to maintain their legitimacy. What's more laughable is that they not only paint
bunch of
these
clowns,
visions, but
dude.
constantly flip the pancake. With policies changing overnight, official documents scrapped at will, and utterly lacking credibility, and naturally, the people have no confidence. For example, the grand vision painted in recent years was Chinese-style modernization. Among the stated goals, the most tangible one was to reach the level of moderately developed country by 2035. According to calculations by domestic colleagues, achieving this goal requires at least 5% annual GDP growth. But how difficult is it to maintain 5%? How much of 2024's 5% is inflated? At the end of the day, relying on concentrated exports driven by expectations to boost the numbers, a great nation is forced to depend on imports and exports to drive 1/3 of its economic growth. This is extremely abnormal. Not to mention the economic structure behind 5%, which can hardly be called high quality. The policy goals set by the CCP itself are often seen as a joke. But in fact, anyone who has studied a bit of economics knows that with diligence and wisdom of the Chinese people, if the system and mechanisms are chosen correctly, achieving a per capita GDP of at least $20,000 to $30,000 is not difficult. In the 1980s, with the opening up and reform, the negation of the class struggle and the comprehensive liberation of social productive forces, China experienced over 30 years of rapid development.
Yeah.
After the 18th Party Congress,
I will give China that credit, dude. Like, they fucking, you know, they were like one of the only countries to fucking, whatchamacallit, you know, grow that fast for the most part.
growth slowed from 10% to struggling to maintain 5% today, for many reasons. The real estate economic model, economic laws, international situations, and so on, discussed by scholars are all valid points. But fundamentally, it's the contradiction between the economic base and superstructure. Without reform of the superstructure, the developmental dividends released by reform and opening up are nearing their end. The previous leaders saw this clearly. Wen Jiabao's original words were that without successful political system reform, economic system cannot be fully realized. If the political system is not reformed, it will strangle many originally beneficial developmental opportunities. A well-known example of this is when Li Keqiang was in office and he allowed the initial growth of WeChat and shared bikes, which led to today's representative enterprises in platform and sharing economies. Of course, Premier was out of place in the political environment of this era. Many things in today's China are dark humor of the system and mechanisms. It will strangle things that are beneficial to its own development. At the smallest level, every individual is constrained by many anti-human systems. At the macro level, policies don't serve the main contradictions but are convoluted. With the entire system like this, socio-economic development in a
Yeah, man. I mean, that's what I've been saying for like the longest time in all these videos, dude. CCP, dude. You know, you gotta get, bro. You gotta go on, get the fuck up on out of here, man.
inevitably hits a bottleneck. If the political system is not reformed, the current and future dilemmas will remain unsolvable. In the summer of 2021, the massive flood in Henan, according to official reports, caused a few hundred deaths and disappearances. In fact,
A
when
few
we stood at the
hundred
Jinzhuang
deaths,
Road tunnel
yo.
in Shenzhou, seeing bodies floating on the road, we knew the actual death toll was understated by at least tenfold. Oh my god. In the past couple of years, social
Said, oh my
hostilities
God.
has grown heavier, with frequent violent
Yeah,
incidents
that's
of
fucked,
slashing
man.
and injuring people. One of the biggest jokes of the CCP authorities is that their words and actions are completely opposite. For example, the party constitution states, "Seek truth from facts, be pragmatic." Yet, many of the authorities' words and deeds completely contradict this, and people bluntly say, "We have seen too many vivid examples, and we are not so easily
Fooled anymore, yup.
If the political system
You're not
is
gonna
not
fool us,
reformed,
dude. What I've been
no
saying for a
matter
fucking
how much
famine,
the
and
narrative of optimism is promoted,
it's 2025, bro.
it's an irredeemable
Technology
system,
exists. You're not gonna
sometimes
fool us
collapse,
anymore.
And scholars at Peking University say few fair words to reach those above. But in reality, intellectuals can do nothing.
That's what the
Apart
CCP
from
fails
some
to
minor
realize, bro.
technical tweaks, they don't
That same technology that you're using to spy on your citizens every single fucking day. You know, that same technology can be used against you, man.
The truth, and can only go along with promoting the so-called narrative of optimism. The systems and mechanism in universities, research institutes, and enterprises follow suit, marked by utilitarianism with no trace of long-termism. Although the soil for innovation has largely eroded in this vast country, occasional high-quality innovation like Black Myth, Wukong, and
Black
DeepSeek
Myth
still
Wukong, yeah,
emerge.
about that.
But under the system, such sparks are unlikely to become career fire. Having said so much, there's no real solution. The problem lies in the economy, but the root is in politics.
Yeah.
If a solution must be proposed, it would likely be the vast majority of Chinese people, market entities, and even most within the system expect.
Yeah.
Political system reform, political system reform, political system reform. Important words must be said 3 times. Now, I know that was long, but hopefully after hearing
Political
all that,
system reform.
you guys realize why it was so important.
Hey, I get to see that. I get to see
well
fucked out of there, man.
argument by a professor who cares about China, or at least the Chinese people. Unfortunately for Xi Jinping, this was picked up by Chinese social media too, and clearly that's not something CCP can let slide. Because regimes fall when people lose their fear, and the Chinese people are beginning to lose fear. This is exactly why, soon after this got picked up by media, there was a retraction issued by the professor. The professor claimed that her email was hacked, and the website should take down the letter. Now, as someone
Of course, I'm
who
not
has been
surprised.
studying the
I'm
CCP
honestly
for
not
a long
surprised.
time, I don't think that's the entire truth. But I think there's something more at play here, especially relating to the retraction, but we're not going to speculate here. Let's dig into the argument the letter made. The most shocking part of all this is the fact that this wasn't the first letter in the last month. In fact, this was the second letter published by a university employee. Just a few weeks ago, we covered how Chinese university dean and her deputy openly published a letter in China calling for all Chinese students to rise up and topple Xi Jinping.
Yeah.
Much like what they were trying to do back in
Yeah, you low-key
1989
should.
at the Tiananmen Square. This is definitely something that's not a good sign for the CCP, and the reason it's happening is because the Chinese economy is truly struggling, all the while Xi Jinping is cracking down on freedoms that the Chinese people have enjoyed so far. On top of that,
And
he's
you know
also
why it's
cracking
not
down
good?
on the
Because these
transparency
fuckers never
that the
learn.
Chinese government
They
had
can
so
never learn
far
from their
in its
mistakes.
already authoritarian system. As we have covered recently,
Absolutely.
CCP has stopped publishing many different economic data because they don't want Chinese citizens and the foreign countries to know exactly how bad the Chinese economy is. Here's more details on that.
YouTube is growing so fast that it has just overtaken
Oh, yeah, I bet.
Netflix to become the most popular app on TV. That's just on TV, by the way. If you combine TV, phones, computers, tablets, people are spending paying and for
data to draw questions about their headline gross domestic product numbers. So, for instance, we're seeing a lot of evidence that suggests that their 5.4% report of growth in Q1 can't be true. And now, as President Trump said, the Chinese economy is contracting. We saw that from the price data for March and February. We also saw it in the PMI, the Purchasing Managers Index for April, which clearly showed factory activity on the downswing. So yes, the Chinese regime does not want us to know what's going on.
Of course.
And
Why
they're
the
continue
fuck
to
would they
restrict
want us to
information
know?
to us. Yes, well, he is. Well, first of all,
What the
there
fuck?
are factory closures. China can't sell to the global south or to anybody else the products that it would otherwise have sold to the U.S. because Trump's tariffs at their current rates keep many Chinese products out of our country. And that means these export-oriented factories, especially those in the southern portion of the country, they have been closing. They've been in trouble for a couple of years now, and they certainly are at a point
Of
where
course
they
they have
can't
been.
continue. This is something that is weakening Xi Jinping's hold on power. Remember, he's got near total accountability because he's taken power from everybody else. And that means he's being blamed for the tariff war, as the Chinese call it. And that means his grip,
Dude,
I
Xi
think, is
Jinping-
now weakening. He's not the all-powerful leader.
Dude,
that
Xi
he was
Jinping is literally a
pre-COVID.
fucking idiot,
Now,
bro.
of course, CCP can hide all the data it wants, but at the end of the day, people know how their lives are getting worse, and that's
Yeah,
not a
literally.
bad thing. China, there's this phenomenon called rat people who have just given up on life because it's
Rat
too
people.
hard to live. It's too expensive to afford a good life, so they just don't do anything. They try to live on as little as possible, often spending just few cents a day. But these people are growing by the day in China. More and more people are becoming so-called rat people, and it's becoming a problem for Xi Jinping because many of these people, they go mentally unstable. I don't know what the right word is.
Yeah.
But they try to take out their anger against the society in so-called revenge against society attacks. These are basically people attacking other innocent civilians because they're unhappy with the way lives are in China.
I would imagine so.
150 countries that want to make deals. You know, you have a lot of countries.
The market was really happy with the China situation and the sit-down
They were.
With
And you
the
know
Treasury
what?
Secretary.
If
Is
I
this
didn't
the
do that deal,
beginning?
if I didn't do that deal with China, I think China would have broken apart.
Not us, them.
100% China would have broken apart.
Could have break. They would have broken apart. You know, our country has a lot of spirit. And you know why? Because of November 5th.
Oh, man, dude. Anyways, this video's been long enough, as I always be saying. But, hopefully you make sure to like, subscribe. Hopefully you know the fucking gum on my face. I was fucking chewing gum. This whole shit. But, yeah, yeah, man. I mean, I don't really know, man. I don't know what the fuck China's got going through their head, to be honest. Anyways, I hope you like, comment, subscribe. Make sure you like this shit. Fucking peace. That's the last video.